The women you're about to meet today are survivors of domestic violence. Domestic violence affects millions of women each year. Statistics show that there are over 9,000 victims of domestic violence abuse every day, and 1 in 4 women will experience the abuse during her lifetime. For one guest today, she broke through after 14 years of being beaten, battered, stalked, and harassed. For another, she survived having a gun pointed to her head. These women could have ended up another sad statistic, but instead they fought to be free of the men in their lives who abused them. But other women aren't as lucky. Today, hear how these women pulled through and survived by men that once said that they had loved them. Stay with us. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. Every day, thousands of women are victims of domestic violence brought on by the person in their lives who claim to love them, their husband or their boyfriend. And every year, more than 3 million children who live in a home with domestic violence are witnesses to this crime. Meet Lisa. She overcame 14 years of abuse from a man whom she thought had loved her at one point in her life when she met him at age 15. Lisa, thank you for joining us today. You have an incredibly sad story, actually. You battled domestic violence with this man that you met at 15 for 14 years.
I did.
Tell us, how long have you been free of him now?
Over 6 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Long time. And you met him at 15, and what was life like with him back then?
Initially, it was great. He pretended to love me oh so much, and then it started with the I don't want you to wear this here, and I don't want you to wear that, and I don't want you to wear makeup. And I was so young, I took it as he cares so much about me that he's so worried about somebody taking me away. And then it got worse, and then I got older, and I said, why am I listening to this? You know, I'm a person. Right. And the more I disobeyed, the worse the abuse got.
Right. So when you had first met him, he was almost like your everything.
He was.
And he kind of took you away from a rough home life that you were having, too.
He did. CPS had been involved with my family, and he was my escape from home. You know, he made it seem like everything was perfect when I was with him, and I ran with it. I moved in with him at 16, so it kind of just went from there.
Wow. And what was life like for you growing up, if you don't mind my asking?
With my family?
Mm-hmm.
It was, my stepfather was very rough. My mom obeyed him, so it was basically, I ran to exactly what I grew up in, and it was exactly what happens, the cycle. And when it got to my kids, I refused to let them see it anymore. That my kids were really what got me out of it.
Oh.
I didn't want my daughter, obviously, to come home abused, and I didn't want my boys to grow up to be abusers.
How did the abuse start with this guy that you were with at 15?
It started when I began to wear makeup, when I started to wear what I wanted to wear. When I went to work, he didn't want me to go to work because I had exposure to people who could tell me that what he was doing to me was wrong, and that was just not good in his eyes.
And how deep or how long were you into this relationship when this started?
I was, it was probably 6 months. That's
Wow.
it, when it first started.
So it was still pretty fresh, and to most people in a new relationship, 6 months is still like that honeymoon phase, as they call it.
Yeah.
But for you, it was already the beginning of a nightmare.
It definitely was. And, you know, I can recall even back then, everybody at work would say, oh, your ball and chain is here. I mean, it was so evident to everybody around us. And then when the bruises started, the excuses I used to have to make and the lies I used to have to tell as to where they came from, and then the days I would have to take off of work, but everybody knew. They just didn't know how to approach me, or they wouldn't approach me.
And just going back to when he was acting jealous towards you and said, don't wear makeup or don't wear this, how long did it take you to realize that it wasn't healthy for your relationship for him to treat you that way?
It started when I was 15, and probably by the time I was 18 was when I said, this isn't right. And I did leave.
So it went on for a couple of years.
Yeah, oh yeah. And I left, and I was gone for a month or so, and I got the calls every day, please come back, I'll make things better. And I believed it And I went back, and it started up again. And, when you go back for the first month, maybe things are good.
Yeah.
And then it starts all over again. And unfortunately, each time I left and went back, it would become increasingly worse.
Wow. And the first time that you left and went back, you actually became pregnant with your first child.
I did.
By him.
I
Did that make you feel like you were locked in even more now?
Initially, because I was 20, I was still fairly young, and in my mind, well, maybe this will make him believe that I love him and I'm not going anywhere, and maybe he'll stop. After I gave birth, obviously, it didn't stop. It got actually even worse. And I left more frequently after I had the first. And then one of the times that we had gotten back together, I ended up pregnant with the second. And then I decided marriage. So we got married. And I thought that would finally get him to the point where he would stop, and it didn't. And, I did end up going on to become a domestic violence victims advocate, and becoming educated at that point. A lot of women do end up doing the same thing. They think that all these little changes are going to change him, like we're trying to control his behavior, and that's what I thought.
And he never changed for the better. He changed for the worse as time went on.
He did. He became increasingly dangerous. I mean, I have scars on me that will never go away. And, he went away to jail several times. At one point, he went away for 22 violations of the order of protection. That was a 3-year sentence. When he came out, he was on parole. He did go on to abuse the kids. He went away for that. He's now only been back out in society for 7 months.
Wow.
So whether or not he's going to last again is,
Is there any contact between you and him now that
There
he's
is
been out?
not. There
And
is
he hasn't
not.
even tried to contact you?
No. There's obviously orders of protection that are still, in effect for myself and the 3 kids. But, a part of me hopes for his sake he changes and he becomes, there's still 3 kids that hope that they could have a real father one day. I don't ever see it happening because of my experience with him, but you still always hope.
Yeah. And what can you tell us about his home life growing up? I mean, did you know, was he ever abused or come
Yes,
from
yeah,
an abusive home?
it was in a very abusive childhood that he had. There are 7 brothers and sisters, all of which were abused at one point.
So it's like a vicious cycle almost.
Exactly. And unfortunately, he ended up turning to substance abuse, and that obviously escalated everything.
So that made things a lot worse, I'm sure. So,
yeah.
I mean, you left and came back, several times.
I did.
Most people would want to know why.
In the beginning, it was because I believed that his promises were true, that he really was going to change. Then obviously after I had the kids, I wasn't working. There was money. There was, a home that they needed, food that they needed. There were, necessities that the kids needed. And again, you always believe maybe this time he did change. Maybe this time. I mean, he had come right out of jail right back to my house. At one point, we were pending court, and we were going back and forth, and he was following me. He chased me down the highway. I went straight to the police department, and he followed me right in there. And I got to the point where I was like, I'm just not safe. If he can follow me to a police department, I went into court the next day, and I asked the judge to remove the order of protection, because I felt like I was safer with him in my house knowing what was coming at me rather than outside my window. There was one time I came home from work, and there was an order of protection. He wasn't supposed to be there, and I walked in the house, and he was there. Fortunately, the neighbor had seen, and they called the police, and my house was surrounded with guns drawn, but from the police department. They knew him so well because of his behavior. And, unfortunately, when we ended up going to grand jury, I found out that he had actually done this to other girls in his past, which I didn't know. Who has access to that information when you're 15 years old?
Now, how old was he at the time when you had met him? Was he relatively
he was 19.
close to you? So he was a little bit
19,
older.
Yeah.
Now, when you did go and come back and having several children with him already, when they got a little bit older, were they witnesses to this abuse abuse that was going
They
on?
were. They definitely were. I put them into, obviously after I left, I put them into counseling. They saw an amazing counselor who, helped them through a lot, and they're amazing kids. They, really have come quite far. They're very strong,
Wow.
very strong, considering what they have seen, what they've been through. They're amazing kids.
And when one of your children were actually 6 months old, I understand he took like a vacuum hose, and when he threw it, it did strike.
He was
them.
angry and threw the vacuum hose, and it hit him in the leg and bruised him. And when the kids started to get affected was when I knew I had to go.
So that was like a breaking point for you.
Oh yeah, my kids are my life, and
Yeah.
anybody who knows me knows that. And they just, you can't. I mean, they're innocent. My problems with him, or what he thought were problems, should not have been taken out on them. And the minute he started with them was when I said, I gotta go.
Did you ever say to yourself, I mean, looking at you here, you're such a beautiful, strong woman to survive all of this. It took you a very long time, but
That's it.
you are
8
a
years
survivor.
ago, I was not like this at all. It was sit, and I sat where he wanted me to sit. I just, people know me today as being very strong. I mean, I speak to, victims, and I'm quite vocal on my opinions now, but had you known me 10 years ago, it was not like that.
Wow.
I mean, he had such control over me. And ironically, when I went to high school, I was also a very strong person. It was just like this gap in my life where I just was totally controlled.
And back during that time when all this was going on, was there ever a time where you said to yourself, I deserve better than this?
Absolutely. I would say I deserve better, but I didn't know the steps to take to get to that point. And, I have to say between the children starting to be abused and starting to be affected by it, and having the right district attorney and the right counselor, and all of that combined all at the same time is really what helped me get out. I had been through, I can probably say 12 to 15 different district attorneys.
Wow.
Some of which handled it in the right way, and others which handled it in not such a good way. A victim needs to be handled in a certain way. They need to gain your trust. And if you can't get that from them, and I know they're doing a job, I know they just have to prosecute, but the district attorney that handled that case is what made all the difference in the world.
Wow.
All the difference.
Amazing. And the times that you did spend away from him, when you did break free and spent a month, and then eventually you spent a year away from him.
I did.
What was he doing to try to get you back?
Oh boy, he would sit outside the house, he would follow me at work, he would send me flowers. My mother's house, if I went to my mother's house, he would follow anybody. My mother has a 90-year-old friend.
My goodness.
He followed her to her home and asked her why she was talking to me. I mean, and I didn't even know this stuff until the woman called my mom and said something, and I'm humiliated. I'm making every excuse under the sun. Oh, he must have thought it was somebody else, and because it wasn't to protect him, it's the humiliation I was going through.
Yeah.
It was just, I didn't want anybody to know that he does this type of stuff. But
Did your mom know that you were going through this?
She did. Sometimes she was supportive, and other times, she wasn't so supportive. Unfortunately, and I didn't find this out until later when I'm working in the field, a lot of parents who see this think if they're not entertaining it, it's not there. And obviously it took a long time for me to grasp that, and it was always like, what do you mean you won't come help me, or what do you mean I can't come stay there, and all the little things that happened along the way. But then you understand why later. If she didn't have to accept it, then it wasn't really happening.
Yeah. So did you feel like you were basically on your own and having to fend for yourself and your kids?
I did. My sister, she was very supportive. She's a little temperamental, and she had gone after him a few times. But other than that support, it was basically me, and then obviously the kids, and I knew I needed to be strong for them. So.
What was life like on a daily basis living with him when he was getting more and more abusive? Say, like when you're back after 2-3 times came back. I mean, what was your life like on an everyday basis with him? Was there abuse every day?
Pretty much. I can't say pretty much. If I obeyed, it was fine. And by obey, I mean, by the time he got home, the house had to be vacuumed. The lines in the rug had to be perfectly straight. The lines in the comforter had to be straight when you made it. He was very anal about many things, and if that was all done and the house was clean when he got home, it was okay. He would come home, have his couple of beers, watch a hockey game, and go to bed.
Wow.
If those things weren't done, then, or something was out of order, or if he came home and I was talking to a neighbor, then things got crazy.
And you did end up marrying him, though.
I did. I married him while I was pregnant with the second one, and I believed that that would help the situation. You know, I mean, I was 23, so at the time, well, maybe this will be the solution, and you know, it apparently was not.
Yeah. I mean, what was it like to have to divorce him, and how was he handling through
Well,
that?
fortunately, I divorced him while he was away. He was up in prison. And even that, obviously, he tried to fight. You know, first he tried to fight it on some technicality about being a religious ceremony and putting a barrier to remarriage, which obviously he wasn't able to do. And then he was trying to fight because New York State has a law that $25 is the minimum amount of child support that somebody can pay. You can't go any lower than that. He was having an issue with that. I don't even want the child support, you know, just sign the papers, let me move on with my life. And
just to be free of it all.
Exactly.
I mean, it took you a very long time, but you did. But I just want to talk about this a little bit. When he was in jail and then was released, he should have been released on a $25,000 bail.
That was one of the times.
It ended up being $25.
Yeah, there was one point. And again, you know, he was arrested so many different times that I don't recall which time it was, but there was one point he was arrested. The bail was set at $25,000. And at the time, because I didn't have a job, the phone was disconnected. So the district attorney actually showed up at the house and said he's been released. Somehow, some way, $25 was entered into the system rather than $25,000.
And this isn't something that you have to share with us, but you have your own reservations about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sad. So how did you finally find the strength to get out of this after 14 years? What was the breaking point for you?
It was the kids. You know, they would cry and they would have to see Daddy taken out by cuffs, and they would have to see Mommy crying all the time and bruised. And you know, when it got to the point where he was now getting angry at them for defending me, it was time to go. Yeah. You know, they didn't deserve that. I don't want my daughter coming home with an abusive boyfriend, and I most certainly don't want those boys going out there and repeating the cycle. So it was extremely important to me to break the cycle and not have it continue anymore.
As a victim, what had you walked away with after this experience?
My kids, that they were the number one thing, and you know, it's made me a very strong person, you know, and like I was saying earlier, you wouldn't have recognized me 10 years ago. I wouldn't even speak in public. Doing this would have never happened. You couldn't have paid me $1 million to get here. It just wasn't going to happen. So, you know, I mean, it's made me who I am. It's molded me, and it's given me the opportunity to help people who are in a domestic violence situation and show them you can get out, and you can get out alive.
There are so many sad statistics out there, and the fact that
There
and I'm going to move on to you now, Annemarie. Lisa, thank you so much for sharing this, and please feel free to chime in as we go on and discuss the subject. But Annemarie, you were in something similar, not as long as Lisa has.
Right.
You were in an abusive relationship for 2 years, and you also met him when he was very young.
Yeah, I was 18, you know, when we met, and I don't know, everything was, you know, same thing, you know, it's great in the beginning and things like that, and then you don't know it at the time, but they become, you know, controlling and obsessed and things, you know, like that. Obviously, the same thing you went through. And
did you feel that it was just a sign of affection, some sort of weird affection?
It's taken as that they really care about you. And I think probably if you ask any girl about that they'll tell you that, you know. And so, I mean, I've since then, you know, and we were talking about this before the show too, that you can see it a mile away with other women and other girls. You know, that if you see something and you say something to them and they go, and I usually wait to hear what they say. If they go, oh, he just cares about me, and then I'm like, no, wrong answer. He doesn't. That's, you know, and you try to save who you can save,
Yeah.
you know. And but yeah, that's how it started out, was like that. And then so I would say the first 2 years were pretty good, although it was like a slower process of the controlling thing. And we actually moved in together. And I mean, at the time, I didn't. He was, my family's Italian Irish, and he met my uncles that are Italian, and so he, thought we were connected to the mob or something. And I never told him that we weren't. I would just say we don't discuss that, because I wanted him to think we were. And I don't know, just something inside me was like, in case something ever happened. But why am I saying in case something ever happened?
Yeah.
I like, looking back, I don't know why I thought that, but thank God I did that, because it slowly was things like. One time we got into a fight, and he like yanked the phone out of the wall. I said, I'm calling my mom, I'm going over there. No, you're not going anywhere, kind of thing. Things like that. Until one day I don't even know. I can't honestly remember, and maybe I blocked it out. I don't remember what we were fighting about, but we're in the living room, we're fighting about something, and he like pulls a gun out to me.
Oh my
and
gosh.
Inside, like, I'll never show my fear. That's the thing. Inside, I was freaking out, like, oh my God. But something told me, like, just chill out, and
And he pointed at your head, actually.
Yeah. And he said, I ought to just shoot you now. And I just stared at him, because I was trying to think of what to say, because then I don't want to freak out. They want you to freak out. They want you to have the fear. I didn't know what to do, so I just stared at him. And I don't know where I got these words. I have no idea. I mean, I'm 20 at the time. I just said, if you're going to do it, and I just moved the gun a little bit more over. I said, get it right the first time. I said, because I'm going to tell you something. If you don't, and I said, my uncles you're so fond of, I said, they'll come looking for you. I said, and by the way, I said, if the body winds up dead somewhere, I said, they're going to come looking for you anyway. I said, so go ahead, pull it. I just waited. And then he just, like, pulled it away, and he sits down on the couch, and he's crying, and, I can't believe I did that with you, and this and that. And I just, like, started hugging him and saying, like, it's okay, but inside I'm like, you freak, But I didn't want him to get excited again, so I'm like, it's okay, I understand.
So you kind of do like a reverse psychology kind
totally.
of thing.
I had to, for my, because I just wanted to run out of there.
Yeah.
But then I didn't want him to get crazy. He has a gun in his hand.
And how deep were you into the relationship when that happened?
We were engaged.
Wow.
And that's
was it a year, 2 years?
Like 2 years. Yeah. So I was just like, oh my God, So that's when I I didn't tell anybody about that at the time. Nobody. And I think that's more of that's another thing we were talking about before, was how you make excuses if people say things, and you say, no, he's just having a bad day, or no, everything's fine. Everything's fine. And inside I know for me, I was screaming. Like, you want someone to help you, but you can't ask for the help because, and people say, oh, you're protecting him, and it's not protecting him.
Why did you feel like you couldn't ask anybody for help?
Because then you get humiliated. Because, you're with this person, and again, same thing, I was young. I certainly, well, now I wouldn't even put up with that. I would just, but at the time you're 19.
One gesture and you're out.
And that's it, yeah. So you don't know when you're 19, 20, you just,
They also have a way of making you believe that they're coming for you. You can go
Yeah, they
ahead and
do.
leave, but I'm coming for you, and
Yeah.
you're not going to make it through. Like,
and they'll find you anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, 90% of them have a philosophy: if I can't have you, nobody's going to.
That's it.
And they drill that
Unbelievable.
into your head, and you truly believe it.
And
It puts
that
fear
was,
into you, I'm sure.
Without a
right,
doubt.
and you do feel if you go anywhere, they'll find you, and that you can't. And that's how I was feeling. Like, I feel like couldn't get out of it, but I have to get out of it now. So with work, he started working on Saturdays, and then oh, have a good day, and I'm going to my mom's. I'm gonna go do laundry, that kind of thing. Yeah, I was going and doing laundry, but at the same time, I'm moving things out. In a very unsuspicious. I didn't even want the neighbors to see it, in case
So you
they
did
said.
it very, just so you could kind of slide.
Oh, I was under
right
the
out of
radar,
it.
totally. Yeah, because I didn't want the neighbors to say, "Oh, are you guys moving?" What are you talking about? Oh, I started taking boxes to the car. No, shut up. It's not your business. I'm trying to get
Yeah.
out of this situation. So I finally, when I got everything out that I wanted to get out, I remember being on the phone with my mom, and I just, I was actually okay in telling her, Mom, I need to move. Like, I need to, you know. And she said, well, why don't you? I didn't know that. She told me later she was waiting for that phone call. You know, she knew something wasn't right. But she didn't know what.
But she didn't know exactly.
Right. And she said, why don't you come home, get yourself together, stay here for a while, save some money, get back on your feet. And then it was more for her. She's like, no, I want you. I don't care how old you are. You're my baby, and you better come home here, because then let him come. And, you know, my mom was tough. You know, she's like, then he'll have to face me. So but I broke down when she said that. And I broke down crying only because there was such love there. Do you know what I mean? Like, no matter what, that's how my mom was with us. So I said, okay, and I just basically, I left and just called him and said, I moved out.
Wow.
And I said, and don't come here looking for me. I left, like,
And that
furniture
was
and
that.
everything I left. Yeah, all that stuff I didn't, you know.
And he never contacted you after that?
Oh, no, he did. He somehow, I don't know how he got, I had a private, you know, my own phone. He got the number, and he would call. My mom would hear me yelling, and she would actually come in and just hang the phone up and say, you need to stop this, you know. And it wasn't until later when I basically told her everything, and, you know, and she was so angry, you know, and I told my uncles too, and what do you mean, you know, put a gun to your head, oh my God, you know. I'm like, really? You don't do, you know, you don't, just let it go.
Yeah.
I'm like, life will take care of him, you know. And I mean, I haven't, since then, this was all in California, because I grew up in California, but through the years, I don't know, somebody told me as recent as like 2 years ago that they saw him, and he's living in his car and whatever, and
Wow.
you know,
So
I
you
mean,
both
as a
made-
human being, I actually feel bad because I don't want anybody homeless, but, you know, in another respect, I'm like, well, if you wouldn't have been such a sleeping with the enemy type of person, you could have had a nice life, so,
Right.
you know.
And let me ask you, I mean, both of you being so young and going through this, did it make it harder to move on to new relationships and trust men?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I'm married now to an amazing person, but to this day, I mean, we've been married almost 6 years now, and almost 5 years now, and I have issues to this day with trust. You know, I mean, I'm getting better, but I'll be the first to admit.
But
I
he
have
absolutely
a
supports you, though, and loves you,
100%.
and does not abuse you whatsoever.
Not at all. Not
Wow.
at all. And he treats the kids as if they're, you know, his. And I mean, he's just, you know, and let me tell you, he went through the whole ending stages of it where my ex was driving past the house and calling. I'm like, this guy's out of here. I know he's going, because
God.
I thought for sure he was going to run.
He stuck
But
by
he
you.
stuck by me, and
And that
he
says a
did.
lot, actually.
Without
so.
a doubt.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well, ladies, thank you
that's
so much for sharing this with us today. And no doubt that if there's anybody out there watching that might be in a situation that you once were, we may have helped them today. So I thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're
for
Not
welcome.
easy
having us.
subject to discuss, I'm
No.
sure, and to have to relive it, but thank you. We'll be right back. More to come. If you're going to be in the Riverhead area and would like to be part of our live studio audience, all you have to do is write for tickets. Please include your name, address, and daytime phone number. Email us at thejasonshow@yahoo.com. Special thank you to Lisa and Annemarie for sharing their stories today. If you at home are a victim of domestic violence or know somebody who is, there is a way out. For more information on this subject, including how you can get out if you are a victim, contact us here at the Jason Galka Show at 631-574-9678. Till next time.